What if one single spit in a plastic tube could erase 33 years of your life in less than 48 hours? That's exactly what happened to me. I was just a bored 33-year-old woman in Seattle who bought a 23andMe kit on a Tuesday night because my friends were doing it. 2 days later the results came in. And the man I've called Dad my entire life isn't my father. Not even close. This is the story of how one DNA test destroyed my family, and maybe, just maybe, forced me to find the truth I never knew I knew. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Jenkins. I'm 33 years old. I work as a senior marketing coordinator for a mid-sized tech company downtown Seattle, and up until last Thursday night I thought I had a pretty normal, slightly boring life. I have a small apartment in Capitol Hill with a ridiculous number of plants, a rescue cat named Milo who hates everyone except me, and a decent relationship with my parents. Or at least I thought I did. My dad, Robert Allen Jenkins, is 58 now. He's a retired auto mechanic, the kind of guy who still wears the same faded blue work shirt he's owned since the 90s, drinks his coffee black and believes silence is a form of love. He never said, "I love you," out loud more than maybe 5 times in my entire childhood. He showed it by fixing my bike, showing up to every soccer game with a cooler full of Gatorade, and never missing a single parent-teacher conference. Mom always said, "Your father isn't good with words, Sarah. But he'd walk through fire for you." I believed her. I still want to believe her. Mom, Linda Marie Jenkins, is the complete opposite. She's 56, works part-time at a flower shop, laughs too loud at her own jokes, and has this way of hugging you so tight you feel like everything in the world is going to be okay. She's the one who taught me how to bake chocolate chip cookies at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, the one who cried harder than I did when my first boyfriend broke my heart. We live in a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside Seattle, the same house I grew up in. White picket fence, maple tree in the front yard, the whole American dream postcard. Every Sunday we still have family dinner. Or we did, until 2 days ago. It started so stupidly innocent. My best friend, Jess, texted me at 7:14 p.m. last Tuesday. "Jess, girl, I just did 23andMe. I'm 14% Italian and apparently related to some random guy in Ohio. Send help. You doing it with me or what?" I laughed, poured myself a glass of cheap Pinot Noir and clicked buy now before I could overthink it. $49 and free shipping. Why not? Everyone was doing it. It was just fun ancestry stuff. I spit in the tube the next morning, dropped it at the post office on my way to work and forgot all about it. The email came exactly 41 days later. Thursday, 6:47 p.m. Subject: Your 23andMe results are ready, Sarah. I was sitting on my couch in leggings and an oversized hoodie, Milo purring on my lap when I opened it. First the ethnicity estimate. Mostly Northwestern European, some British and Irish, a tiny bit of Scandinavian. Cool. Then the DNA relatives section. And that's when my stomach dropped straight through the floor. The very first relative listed was a close family match. Not my dad. Not my mom. A woman named Margaret Thompson, 64 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. Predicted relationship: first cousin once removed or great aunt. I stared at the screen for what felt like 10 full minutes. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I refreshed the page 3 times thinking it was a glitch. It wasn't. I went to the full ancestry report. On my father's side, 0 matches. Not a single person from the Jenkins family tree that Mom and Dad had spent years building on Ancestry.com. Not Grandpa Jenkins, not Uncle Mike, not any of the cousins I grew up with at Christmas. Nothing. I called Jess at 7:12 p.m., voice already cracking. "Jess, hey, I think my dad isn't my dad." She laughed at first. Then she heard me crying and went dead silent. "Sarah, breathe. Send me the screenshot." 30 seconds later she whispered, "Holy shit." That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my living room surrounded by every family photo I could find in the apartment. Me at age 5 on Dad's shoulders at the county fair. Me at 16, blowing out candles while Dad stood behind Mom with this awkward half-smile he always wore in pictures. Me graduating college. Dad in the back row, arms crossed, looking proud but somehow distant. Now every single memory felt like a lie I had been living inside. The next morning, Friday, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. I told them I was coming for coffee. Mom was thrilled. Dad just grunted, doors open like always. I sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table we've had since I was 7, and watched Mom pour coffee into the same chipped blue mugs. Dad was reading the sports section, glasses low on his nose. I pulled out my phone, opened the 23andMe app and slid it across the table between them. Mom, I need you to look at this. Mom took the phone first. Her smile froze. I watched the color drain from her face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. She didn't say a word. Just stared. Dad leaned over, squinting. He read for maybe 6 seconds. Then he stood up so fast the chair scraped backward and fell over with a loud crack. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. Linda, you told me she was mine. The kitchen went completely silent except for the refrigerator humming. Mom started crying. Not the pretty kind of crying. The ugly, gasping, shoulder-shaking kind. She covered her face with both hands and kept repeating, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Dad walked out the back door without another word. I heard his old Ford truck start up and drive away. He didn't come back for 4 hours. That was the moment my entire life cracked open. Mom finally looked at me, eyes red and swollen. Sarah. Honey, there's something I need to tell you. But you have to promise me you'll let me finish before you hate me. I nodded, even though my heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. She took a deep breath that sounded like it hurt. Before I married your father, I was seeing someone else. His name was Daniel. Daniel Hargrove. He was everything your dad wasn't back then. Charismatic. Funny. He made me feel alive. We worked together at the old insurance office downtown. It was only 3 months, but it was intense. Passionate. Stupid. She wiped her eyes. I found out I was pregnant with you right after Daniel left for a job in California. He didn't want kids. He made that very clear. Your father, Robert, he had been in love with me since high school. He knew I was pregnant. He knew the baby might not be his. And he still got down on one knee in this very kitchen and said, Marry me, Linda. I'll love that child like she's my own. No one ever has to know. Mom reached for my hand but I pulled it back. I couldn't help it. So you lied to me for 33 years? My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. We didn't lie. We just never told the truth. Robert raised you. He changed your diapers. He taught you how to drive. He was at every single one of your recitals. He is your dad in every way that matters, Sarah. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Except genetically. Except in my blood. Except in every single cell of my body that just got matched to a stranger in Portland named Margaret Thompson. Mom closed her eyes. Margaret is Daniel's older sister. The room spun. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee mug. It shattered on the tile floor. The same floor I used to draw on with crayons as a kid. I need air. I walked out the front door, got in my car and drove. I don't even remember where. I just drove until the sun went down and the city lights blurred through my tears. That night, back in my apartment, I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't do. I typed, Daniel Hargrove, Portland, Oregon into Google. The first result was an obituary. Daniel Michael Hargrove. Passed away March 12, 2019. Age 58. Survived by sister Margaret Thompson and one son, Thomas Hargrove, 34. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I have a half-brother I never knew existed. And my real father died 7 years ago without ever knowing I was his. I cried so hard Milo jumped off the bed and hid under the couch. Around 2:17 a.m. something strange happened. I was half asleep, phone still in my hand, when I smelled something. Pipe tobacco and Old Spice. The exact smell of my dad, Robert, when he used to tuck me in as a little girl. But he wasn't here. No one was here. I sat up, heart racing. The smell lingered for maybe 10 seconds, then vanished. I told myself it was just grief playing tricks on me. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Because the next morning when I opened my closet to grab a jacket, I found something I swear wasn't there the night before. An old, faded photograph. Me at age 4. Sitting on Robert's lap at the zoo. On the back, in Mom's handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Sarah and her daddy. June 1997. Except someone, and I don't know who, had written underneath it in different ink, much newer. Not blood. But always yours. The handwriting looked exactly like my dad's. I stood there in my closet at 7:30 a.m. holding that photo, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. And that's when I realized. This was only the beginning. Because the DNA test didn't just tell me who my father wasn't. It told me there's an entire other life, an entire other family waiting for me in Portland. And I have no idea if I'm brave enough to go find them. But I know I can't stay here pretending everything is still the same. Not anymore. Yesterday I thought my life was ordinary. Today I'm staring at an old photograph with handwriting that looks like my dad's. But he swears he never wrote it. And somewhere in Portland, a woman I've never met is carrying half my DNA. I didn't know how much more my heart could break in 48 hours. But I was about to find out. I spent the entire weekend in a fog. Friday night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes I smelled that faint pipe tobacco and Old Spice again. It would drift through my bedroom like someone had just walked past the bed. Milo would lift his head, ears twitching, staring at the empty corner near the window. Then it would vanish, leaving only the hum of the city outside. Saturday morning I drove back to my parents' house. The maple tree in the front yard looked the same as always, but everything else felt wrong. The white picket fence suddenly seemed like a cheap stage prop hiding something rotten underneath. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were puffy, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail she only wore when she was stressed. She tried to smile but it cracked halfway. Honey, come in. Your dad's in the garage. I didn't hug her. I just walked past into the familiar smell of coffee and lemon cleaner. The house that used to feel like safety now felt like a museum of lies. Dad was sitting on an old stool in the garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects. His hands were greasy but his eyes were clear and tired. He looked up when I entered. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he wiped his hands on a rag and said quietly, I always knew there was a chance. But I chose you anyway. Every single day. His voice broke on the last word. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger exactly, something heavier. Grief for the little girl who never questioned why her dad sometimes looked at her like she was a miracle he didn't deserve. I need to know everything, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. No more half-truths. No more protecting me. I'm 33 years old, Dad. I can handle it. He nodded slowly. We moved to the kitchen table again. Mom sat across from me, twisting a paper napkin until it shredded. Dad sat at the head like always, but this time his shoulders were slumped. Mom started first, voice soft and trembling. Daniel Hargrove was magnetic. He had this laugh that filled the whole office. We worked together for 8 months. Your father and I were already engaged, but things were strained. We were young. I was scared about marriage. Daniel made me feel seen in a way Robert never did back then. It was only a few weeks. 3 times. I ended it the moment I realized what I was doing. Daniel left for California 2 weeks later. I never told him about the pregnancy. I convinced myself the baby was Robert's. The timing was close enough. She looked at Dad with eyes full of 33 years of guilt. Robert knew the truth the day I told him I was pregnant. He could have walked away. Instead he said, if this baby has your eyes or your smile, I'll love her twice as hard to make up for it. Dad reached across the table and took Mom's hand. The gesture hurt more than anything else. I raised you as mine, he said, looking straight at me. Blood never mattered. Not when you fell off your bike and I carried you inside bleeding. Not when you cried on my shoulder the night your high school boyfriend dumped you. Not when you graduated and I was so damn proud I couldn't speak. Tears were running down my face now. Then why does it feel like my whole identity is gone? I whispered. Mom pulled out an old shoebox from under the table. Inside were letters, photos, a faded ultrasound picture. We kept these, she said. Daniel's last letter before he left. He never knew. I never sent the ones I wrote after you were born. I picked up the ultrasound. My tiny form at 12 weeks. On the back in Mom's young handwriting, our baby, maybe. The word maybe felt like a knife. I spent hours going through that box. There were pictures of Mom and Dad at their wedding. Mom already showing slightly, smiling like the world was perfect. Dad looking at her with pure devotion. There were baby photos of me. Dad holding me like I was made of glass. His smile in those pictures was different from the later ones, softer, more desperate. Around 4 p.m. something strange happened again. I was alone in my old bedroom, sitting on the bed I slept in until I was 18. The room still had the same lavender walls, though faded now. My old stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, sat on the shelf. I picked him up and a small piece of paper fell out from inside his torn seam. It was a note, folded tiny, in handwriting that matched the one on the zoo photo. Sarah. Even if the blood says different, you will always be my daughter. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more of me. The ink looked fresh. Not 30 years old. Not even 10. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped the bear. I ran downstairs. Mom. Dad. Did either of you put this in Mr. Button's? They both looked at the note. Mom went pale. Dad's face tightened with something like fear mixed with sadness. I didn't write that, Dad said quietly. Not recently. Mom whispered, I haven't touched that bear in years. The three of us stood in silence while the grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. That night I stayed over. I couldn't face my empty apartment and the strange smells that followed me. Sunday morning I made the decision. I was going to Portland. I messaged the 23andMe match, Margaret Thompson, with a short, careful note. Hi Margaret, my name is Sarah Jenkins. We matched as close relatives. I recently learned some surprising family information. Would you be open to talking? No pressure at all. I hit send before I could overthink it. The reply came faster than I expected. Just 40 minutes later. Margaret, Sarah. I've been waiting for this message for a very long time. Yes. I would love to talk. When are you free? My stomach flipped. We arranged to meet Tuesday afternoon at a quiet cafe in Portland. Neutral ground. Monday night I barely slept again. This time the smell of pipe tobacco was stronger, lingering in my car when I drove to work. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone in the backseat. At work, my boss noticed I looked like hell and sent me home early. I spent the afternoon researching Daniel Hargrove. He had been a successful insurance salesman, then moved into real estate. Married twice. One son, Thomas, now 34, living in Portland too. Daniel passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2019. There were obituary photos. He had my nose. My exact smile in one candid shot. Seeing his face felt like looking in a mirror that showed a version of me I never knew existed. Tuesday morning I drove the 3 hours to Portland with shaking hands on the wheel. The cafe was small, warm, with exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh espresso. Margaret was already there, an elegant woman in her mid-60s with silver-streaked hair and kind but nervous eyes. When she saw me, she stood up slowly. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, you look just like him. We hugged awkwardly at first, then tighter. He smelled like lavender and old books. We sat down and talked for 4 straight hours. She told me Daniel had spoken about a what-if from his Seattle days. He always wondered if there had been a child. He never knew for sure. Margaret had suspected when she saw my DNA match, but waited for me to reach out. She showed me photos of Daniel as a young man, laughing, full of life. Photos of Thomas, my half-brother. He had the same eyes as me. Then she said something that stopped my heart. Daniel left something for you. He wrote a letter years before he died after his diagnosis. He gave it to me and said, if a daughter ever shows up, give her this. He didn't know your name. He just hoped. She pulled an envelope from her purse. The paper was yellowed, sealed with tape. My name wasn't on it. Just to my maybe daughter. I couldn't open it there. I thanked Margaret, promised to stay in touch, and drove to a park overlooking the river. Sitting on a bench with the Willamette River flowing below, I opened the letter with trembling fingers. It was 3 pages long, written in strong, slanted handwriting. Daniel wrote about the brief time with my mom. How he regretted leaving so suddenly. How he always felt something was missing in his life. He talked about watching other fathers with their daughters and feeling an unexplained ache. The last paragraph broke me completely. If you're reading this, then you found me. Or I found you through blood and time. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I never got to teach you how to ride a bike or scare away your first boyfriend. But know this, from the moment I suspected there might be a child, I loved you in my heart. Blood or not, you were mine in the ways that matter most to a father who never got the chance. Be kind to the man who raised you. He did what I couldn't. And if you can find it in your heart, maybe one day you can forgive us all. I cried so hard an older woman walking her dog stopped and asked if I was okay. That night, back in my hotel room, the strange occurrences continued. I woke up at 3:33 a.m. to the sound of soft whistling, an old tune my dad used to whistle while working in the garage. You are my sunshine. No one was there. But on the nightstand next to Daniel's letter was another small note in the same fresh handwriting as before. He loved you first in his own way. I loved you every day after. The man who stayed. I didn't scream. I just sat there holding both letters. One from the father I lost before I knew him, one from the father who chose me every single day. And for the first time I felt the weight of two men's love pressing down on my chest. One biological. One chosen. Both real. Both painful. Both mine. But the hardest part was still coming. Because I had to go home and decide what kind of daughter I wanted to be now. To the man who raised me. To the family that was never fully mine. And to the half-brother who didn't even know I existed yet. The DNA test didn't just rewrite my past. It was forcing me to rewrite my future. And I had no idea which version of Sarah Jenkins would survive the rewrite. I didn't sleep the rest of that night in the Portland hotel. I sat on the edge of the bed with both letters in my lap. One from the father I had just lost before I ever found him, and one from the man who had chosen me every single day for 33 years. The city lights outside the window blurred through fresh tears. By 6 a.m. I checked out, drove back toward Seattle and felt every mile pulling me in two directions at once. The house looked exactly the same when I pulled into the driveway at noon. White siding, maple tree still dropping its last red leaves, Mom's chrysanthemums blooming along the walkway like nothing had changed. But everything had. Mom must have been watching from the window because she opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller somehow, like the secret she had carried for 33 years had finally hollowed her out. "Sarah," she whispered. "You came back." I stepped inside without answering. The smell of fresh coffee and banana bread hit me, the same comforting scent that used to mean Saturday mornings and safety. Now it only made my chest ache. Dad was at the kitchen table staring into an empty mug. When he saw me he stood up slowly like an old man. His eyes were bloodshot. He had aged 10 years in 3 days. I set my bag down and pulled out the letter from Daniel. I placed it on the table between us, right next to the salt shaker we had used since I was a kid. "I met Margaret," I said. My voice came out flat, almost clinical. "She gave me this. It's from him. He wrote it before he died. He hoped I existed." Mom covered her mouth with both hands. Dad didn't touch the letter. He just looked at it like it might burn him. "I read it," I continued. "He said you did what he couldn't. He told me to be kind to you." Dad's shoulders started to shake. He sat back down heavily and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. "I never hated him," he said after a long silence. "I hated that he got to be the exciting one for a few weeks and I got to be the safe one for the rest of your life. But I never hated him. I just wanted you to be mine." I felt the tears coming again but I swallowed them down. This wasn't the time to break. "I want to meet Thomas," I said. "My half-brother. He's 34. He lives in Portland too. Margaret said she would introduce us if I wanted." The kitchen went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator cycling on. Mom spoke first, voice trembling. "Are you sure, honey? This is moving so fast. You've only known for 3 days." 3 days, I repeated. 3 days and my whole life is different. I can't pretend anymore. I need to know what the other half of me looks like. I need to know if he laughs like me or if he has the same birthmark on his left shoulder. Dad finally looked up. His eyes were raw. "Then go," he said. "But when you come back, if you come back, I'm still here. I'm still your dad. Blood or no blood." I nodded but I couldn't say the words he wanted to hear. Not yet. That afternoon I texted Margaret again. She answered within minutes and arranged everything for the following Saturday. Thomas already knew. He had seen the DNA match too and had been waiting just like she had. The week in between was a blur of ordinary life that felt completely wrong. I went to work Monday through Friday. I answered emails, sat in meetings about Q3 campaign metrics, smiled at my coworkers like nothing was happening. Every time someone asked how my weekend was I said, "Fine," and felt like a liar. At night I came home to Milo, who kept staring at the same empty corner of the living room and purring at nothing. Twice I woke up to the faint sound of that old whistle, "You are my sunshine," drifting from the hallway. Once I found my childhood stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, sitting on the kitchen counter when I knew I had left him on the bed. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. It felt too private, too impossible, like the universe was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. Saturday morning I drove to Portland again. This time the 3 hours felt shorter, like the road itself was pulling me forward. The meeting was at Margaret's house, a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood with a big front porch. When I pulled up, a man was already standing on the steps. Tall, dark hair, same nose as the photos of Daniel. Same nervous half-smile I saw in the mirror every morning. Thomas. We stood there for a second just looking at each other. Then he stepped forward and pulled me into a hug that felt like it had been waiting 33 years to happen. Jesus, he said against my hair. You look like him. You really do. We spent the whole day on that porch. Margaret brought out iced tea and old photo albums. Thomas showed me pictures of Daniel holding him as a baby, teaching him to throw a baseball, standing proudly at his college graduation. I showed him pictures of me, the ones where Dad was in the background, always watching, always there. Thomas told me about growing up with Daniel. He was a good dad, he said, but there was always this space. Like he was waiting for something he never got. I think that something was you. I cried again. Thomas cried too. We laughed through the tears when we discovered we both hated olives and both secretly loved old Western movies. At one point Margaret left us alone. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Look, he said quietly. I don't expect you to call me brother tomorrow. I don't expect anything. But I want you in my life. However slow or however fast you need. You've got a whole other family now. 2 nephews you haven't met yet. A sister-in-law who's going to lose her mind when she hears about you. I smiled for the first time in days. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers. We promised to text. We took a selfie together on the porch. The first picture of us as siblings. On the drive home that night, something shifted inside me. The anger I had been carrying toward Mom and Dad started to feel smaller. Not gone. Just smaller. I stopped at a gas station halfway back to Seattle. While I was pumping gas, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Thomas had already sent the selfie to his wife. She had replied with a string of crying emojis and the words, "Tell her she has a family here whenever she's ready." I stared at the message until the pump clicked off. When I got home it was almost midnight. Mom and Dad were still awake, sitting in the living room with the lights low. They looked like they hadn't moved since I left. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. I met him, I said. His name is Thomas. He looks like me. He wants me in his life. Dad nodded slowly. Mom reached for his hand. I walked over and sat on the couch across from them. The same couch where I used to fall asleep during Sunday football games. I'm still angry, I said. I'm still hurt. But I'm also grateful. You chose me every day, Dad. You stayed. That matters. It matters more than I can say right now. Dad's eyes filled. He didn't try to hide it. I'll be here, he said again. As long as you need me. Even if you need me less now. We sat in silence for a while, the 3 of us. The grandfather clock ticked. Outside, the wind moved through the maple tree. Then it happened again. The faintest smell of pipe tobacco and Old Spice drifted through the room. Not strong. Just enough to notice. Dad lifted his head slightly like he smelled it too. Mom's eyes widened but she didn't speak. None of us mentioned it. Instead Dad reached over and squeezed my knee the way he used to when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. Whatever happens next, he said, we face it together. The 3 of us. And maybe the 4 of us now. I nodded. That night I slept in my old bedroom for the first time in years. Mr. Buttons was back on the shelf where he belonged. As I drifted off I heard the soft whistle again, "You are my sunshine." But this time it didn't scare me. It felt like a lullaby. Like someone was saying goodbye and hello at the same time. The DNA test had torn my world apart. But piece by piece it was starting to build something new. Something bigger. Something that included 2 fathers, 1 mother, a half-brother I never knew I needed, and a strange, gentle presence that refused to let me feel completely alone. I still didn't know what the final chapter would look like. But for the first time in a week I wasn't afraid of turning the page. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. Thomas and I texted every day. Small things at first. A funny meme, a picture of his 2 little boys playing in the backyard, a song we both suddenly realized we loved. Then deeper things. He told me about the day his dad died, how Daniel had held his hand in the hospital and whispered, "There might be someone else out there. If she ever finds you, tell her I was sorry." I told him about the nights I woke up smelling pipe tobacco and hearing that old whistle. He didn't laugh. he said quietly, maybe some things don't need blood to stay with us. Margaret became a steady presence too. She sent me old family recipes and photos of Daniel as a teenager. The same awkward smile I had in my middle school pictures. Slowly, the stranger in Portland started to feel like family. But home, the white house with the maple tree, was where the real work happened. Mom and I spent long evenings on the back porch wrapped in blankets, drinking the same herbal tea she used to make when I was sick as a kid. She told me stories I had never heard. How terrified she was the day I was born, how Dad had paced the hallway for hours, how he had cried silently when the nurse placed me in his arms for the first time. He looked at you like you were the answer to every prayer he never dared to say out loud, she whispered one night. I think that's when he stopped caring about the blood. You became his miracle. Dad was quieter. He worked in the garage more than usual, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. One Saturday I joined him, handing him tools like I did when I was 10. The radio played old country songs in the background. For a long time we didn't speak. Then he said without looking up from the engine, I was scared, Sarah. Scared that one day you'd look at me and see someone who wasn't enough. That you'd choose the other life. The one with the exciting dad who made your mom laugh the way I never could. I set the wrench down and turned to face him. I'm not choosing, I said. I'm adding. There's room for both. But you're the one who taught me how to change a tire at midnight when my car broke down in college. You're the one who sat through every terrible school play. You're the one who never left. That doesn't get erased by a DNA test. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. You sure about that? I'm sure. He pulled me into a hug that smelled like grease and Old Spice and 33 years of quiet love. I cried into his shoulder the way I hadn't cried since I was a little girl. That night something changed in the house. The whistling stopped. The strange notes no longer appeared. The smell of pipe tobacco faded into memory. It was as if whatever gentle presence had been watching over me had finally decided I was going to be okay. 2 months later we planned a quiet dinner. All of us. Mom cooked her famous lasagna. Dad set the table with the good plates we only used on holidays. I drove to Portland and brought Thomas, his wife Emily, and their 2 boys, my nephews ages 6 and 4. Margaret came too. The first 10 minutes were awkward. Handshakes, polite smiles, too many nice to meet you. Then the younger boy, little Noah, spilled his juice across the table and started crying. Dad immediately grabbed a towel, knelt down and said in that gruff voice of his, Hey buddy, it's just juice. Happens to the best of us. Noah looked up at him with big eyes and smiled. From that moment the ice broke. Thomas and Dad talked about cars for almost an hour. Mom and Emily bonded over gardening tips. The boys ran around the backyard with Milo chasing them. Margaret sat next to me on the couch, holding my hand without saying much. At one point I stepped outside for air. Thomas followed. We stood under the maple tree, leaves crunching under our shoes. You know, he said, Dad would have loved this. All of us together. Messy. Loud. Real. I nodded. I think he's here somehow. In the way Dad looks at the boys. In the way Mom laughs when your wife tells jokes. Thomas smiled. And in you. You've got his stubborn chin and your other dad's steady heart. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. Later that evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, I sat at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad. The same table where everything had started. I've been thinking, I said, about changing my last name. They both froze. Not to Hargrove, I added quickly. Not completely. I was thinking, Jenkins Hargrove. Or maybe just keeping Jenkins but adding a middle name. Something that honors both. Dad reached across the table and took my hand. You do whatever feels right, kiddo. Your name has always been yours to carry. I just want to keep being the man who gets to walk beside you while you carry it. Mom wiped her eyes and smiled. We're proud of you, Sarah. No matter what. That night I dreamed of 2 men standing side by side under the maple tree. One was younger, charismatic, laughing with that magnetic smile from the old photos. The other was older, steady, wearing his faded blue work shirt, arms crossed the way he always did when he was proud. They didn't speak. They just looked at me and nodded like they were saying the same thing. You're going to be okay. You were always loved enough for 2 lifetimes. I woke up with tears on my cheeks but a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in months. Life didn't go back to normal. Normal was gone forever. Instead it became something richer. I started visiting Portland once a month. The boys called me Aunt Sarah and fought over who got to sit next to me at dinner. Thomas and I took a road trip together one weekend, just the two of us talking about everything and nothing. Mom and Dad came to Portland for Thanksgiving. We all cooked side by side in Margaret's kitchen, laughter filling the house. The DNA test had shattered the story I thought I knew. But in its place it built a bigger one. A story with two fathers. One who gave me life, one who gave me a lifetime. A mother who carried a secret heavy enough to break her but chose love anyway. A brother I never knew I needed. And a quiet, gentle presence that reminded me some bonds go beyond blood. Sometimes, late at night when the house is still, I still catch the faintest trace of pipe tobacco and Old Spice. Not often. Just enough to make me smile. I like to think it's both of them checking in. Making sure I'm still choosing to live fully. Making sure I remember that love, real love, was never about DNA. It was about the man who stayed. The man who hoped. And the woman who learned to hold both. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Jenkins. I am 33 years old. I have two fathers. I have one incredible mother. I have a brother, nephews, and a family that looks nothing like the one in the old photo albums. And everything like the one I was always meant to have. The DNA test didn't destroy me. It set me free. And for the first time in my life I feel completely, beautifully whole.